Okay, I have no idea if this is going to work or not. Um, I was talking to someone recently and they asked if I had a YouTube channel, and I said no because there's a lot of work involved. And they told me to start by just reading out the last version of my newsletter before I publish it. And I've done something with my audio and my video and stuff, but I don't know if it's going to work. And I don't know if I'll release this. I want to, but one of the reasons I wanted to do it, particularly this month, is that the topic is creativity. So my newsletter is the Moonlit Minds Journal, and it's something I'm doing with Paradigm Makers to actually understand how we ended up where we are. And so in the newsletter, in the journal, each month I take one issue and I dissect it from pre 1976 all the way through to today to understand the logic that we inherited. And then I identify some design principles that we might want to consider moving forward. It's finally in a place that I love. It's taken me a year and a half. So the first edition was released in September 2024. And since then, it's evolved significantly. It looks nothing like that first edition. And I'm actually really proud of where it's at. So I am going to just read out what I've written. Um, Ordinarily, when I do the final version, I will notice 1,000 things that I want to change, and that's probably going to happen here. And I know that doesn't make a great listening or viewing experience watching someone edit a document, but I thought it was also a nice insight into my process because speaking about creativity, it's different for everybody and it's invisible work. And that's something I talk about a lot is all of the invisible things that happen around us. And this is something that is usually invisible. It's part of my work process. You just see the final polished version. And this month, I think in particular, is quite an interesting one to look at because my first draft was 5,000 words. And I try to keep it at 3,000 because I know even 3,000 words is a lot. And I really appreciate people who do take the time to read it all. I'm also very casual because this is what I look like when I'm editing. It's not fancy, but I guess that's enough of me stalling. Welcome to the 18th edition of Paradigm Makers Moonlit Minds Journal. Side note, can't believe that we're at 18 editions. That's amazing. My monthly reflection. It is April, which in my life means one thing: Melbourne International Comedy Festival. The festival is my favorite time of the year. I block out my calendar and spend my evenings running around the city, laughing in tiny hotel boardrooms, town hall closets, and random underground venues I would never have discovered otherwise. There are many reasons I love this festival, but the main one is our topic this month: creativity. Comedy is the clearest way I've found to watch someone in their creative process. As a creative person, I can tell you it is a life filled with solitude and a messy middle that nobody else understands until the work is finished. And side note, is the work ever actually finished? No, it's not. Watching a comedian build a show from the first time they tell a joke through to the polished final festival show lets me witness the parts of a creative career that make it so different to corporate. Creativity requires space to experiment and play. You need room to move, think, and an ability to switch off from work. When I am in my creative process, I rarely look productive. I'm usually found walking around outside, reading a book, or creating a mess on my analog desk, which is where I'm sitting now. This is the work I could never do in an office. If you've followed me for a while, you've seen this process in action. Moonlit Minds began in September 2024 as a loose collection of ideas written from a rooftop pool overlooking New York City's financial district. Month after month, it evolved into what it is now. The same is true of what I share on LinkedIn. To some, it looks like I keep changing my mind. I am not. I'm just sharing the messy middle because that is where ideas are best tested, challenged, and reshaped. I didn't choose the topic of creativity just to celebrate the achievements of my favorite creative industry or to share my own creative process. I did so for one important reason. Corporate work increasingly requires creative thinking. Since 2015, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs reports have consistently listed creative thinking in the top 5 skills we need to succeed in the future. Despite this, the Program for International Student Assessment in 2022, Creative Thinking Assessment of 66 countries, found that only half of the students in OECD countries could generate original ideas in familiar contexts. And in over 20 countries, students did not reach a baseline level of creative proficiency. Our workplaces are also not designed to support the environment and workflow necessary for creative thinking. So, in honor of 40 years of the Comedy Festival, let's talk about creativity at work. I hope you enjoyed April's Pink Moon, Jess. Now, just a PS before we move on, if anyone wants to see a show but they don't know what they want to see, I have an Insta highlight with all my recommendations, and I'll keep updating it over the next 2 weeks as the festival continues. Exploring the historical context. When we think about creativity at work, what we are actually referring to is the skill of creative thinking. Creative thinking refers to the capacity to bring a new idea or concept into existence through imagination and to imagine something that does not exist. Throughout history, there have been countless examples of how we have thought about creative thinking at work. Now let's go back all the way back in time to pre-1760 and the Renaissance period. It's also known as the Creative Renaissance. The Renaissance was a broad cultural transformation in Europe that accelerated throughout the 14th and 15th centuries. It marked a shift away from medieval traditions towards renewed interest in human creativity, classical knowledge, and individual expression. This became known as the Humanism movement. Now, the reason we remember the likes of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Donatello Di Niccolo, and Raphael Sanzio, I apologize for completely butchering those names. The reason we remember them is because society valued creativity as a branch of human knowledge. If we fast forward to the first industrial revolution, which began in 1760, we were introduced to the Luddites. Now, during the early industrial revolution, textile production shifted from highly skilled artisans working with hand looms to mechanized factory systems using machines. Skilled weavers and framework knitters had traditionally exercised significant creative control over their craft by adjusting patterns, techniques, and materials. But as factories standardized production, this discretion disappeared. Between 1811 and 1816, groups organized machine-breaking protests across England, targeting new textile machinery they believed threatened their livelihoods, working conditions, and control over their craft. These people became known as the Luddites. And this is a phrase that we continue to use for anyone who is resistant to new technology today. Moving forward to the second industrial revolution, starting in 1870, we get Menlo Park. Editing Jess here. I don't know where I got Menlo Park from. It's Menlo Park. Menlo Park. Please ignore that mispronunciation. Menlo. In 1876, Thomas Edison established the Menlo Park Laboratory in New Jersey. It's often described as the world's first industrial research and development lab. And here, Edison organized teams of machinists, chemists, and engineers to systemically experiment and prototype new technologies. This collaborative model produced major innovations, including the practical incandescent light bulb and improvements to electrical power systems. Creative thinking at this time became associated with coordinated research teams embedded inside industrial enterprises. Jumping forward now to the 1970s and the third industrial revolution, this perception of creativity as the role of one team persisted. It was the design team job or it was the innovations team job. They were the ones that were creative. But one core incident at Pixar Studios led to a different approach. Before Toy Story became the lovable version that we know today, it was so bad that production was nearly shut down. Instead, the team rewrote the story together using a structured feedback process. This led to the creation of the Brain Trust, a recurring creative forum that was built on 4 principles. Number 1, no one can override the director. 2, feedback is peer-to-peer. 3, success is shared. 4, notes must be honest, specific, and actionable. In addition to better films, the Brain Trust created a system that made creative thinking more reliable. As Pixar's founder, Ed Catmull, notes, the Brain Trust became a core part of Pixar's ability to produce high-quality work consistently. Now to the fourth industrial revolution, which began in 2011. Now, I just want to caveat this section by saying that I found this really difficult because we're going to talk about Google's 20% time. And Google's 20% time is often cited as a model for workplace creativity. But researching its evolution, it tells a very different story. And personally, I found that it made me sad, honestly. This isn't in the written version, but it made me sad. So let's explore it. In the early 2000s, creativity within Google was framed as a cultural pillar. Individuals and teams were encouraged to explore through initiatives like this 20% time. This initiative allowed you to spend 20% of your working week on something that was unrelated to your core work. It could be anything that you were frustrated with or anything that you thought could possibly help Google. As Google scaled, that framing began to shift. By the early 2010s, creativity was increasingly positioned as a response to complexity and reframed as ingenuity or moonshot thinking. This is like the big innovation. After Alphabet's formation in 2015, the emphasis moved again. Creativity became less about human exploration and more about what AI systems could achieve at scale. By 2024, AI had become central to Google's strategy and growth narrative. All creativity was now related to AI. So what does this actually reveal? This very, very brief history of creativity shows that creativity moved from being recognized as a valuable form of knowledge to being removed from humans, organized into teams, structured through feedback, and now increasingly mediated by AI. It followed authority, tools, and decision-making power, like every single system that we look at in Moonlit Minds. And this reveals a really clear contradiction. Work now demands creative thinking from everybody, but the systems we rely on were never designed to support it. So what logic have we actually inherited? If creativity has followed authority, tools, and decision-making power, the question is no longer whether we as humans are creative. It is what our systems allow creativity to look like. The systems that we inherited were not designed to bring something new into existence or to imagine something that does not exist. The logic we inherited was that specialized teams were responsible for creative thinking, while machines could standardize the rest. It made sense when work was predictable, but it makes less sense now. The problem is not that the systems are broken. It is that the systems were never designed to allow humans to leverage creative thinking. Now, the reason we do this is because we treat creativity like productivity. Our modern work systems were designed using principles of division of labor and scientific management. which prioritized measurable output, standardization, and efficiency. Frederick Taylor, my number one nemesis, believed that productivity could be increased by reducing variability to enable control and coordination at scale. That logic still defines how we understand work today. It assumes value comes from consistency, predictability, and output. Yet these concepts create tension with how creative thinking actually works. When we treat creativity like productivity, it gets measured, compressed, and optimized, rather than being explored. The nature of work has changed, and creative thinking demands more from us. Now, in a study from 2025 by Superside, they found that 70% of creative leaders say many of their most talented designers are working on tasks below their skill level. A 2024 Canva study found that 58% of respondents say their organizational culture does not reward creative pursuits. So what does that actually mean? It means that we demand creative thinking from systems designed to suppress it. Work has shifted from these repeatable tasks to adaptive, knowledge-based work that requires creative thinking. At the same time, digital coordination and AI-augmented production has increased expectations for speed and output, and cost reduction. Can't forget that one. But creative thinking depends on exploration, iteration, and human judgment, activities that are difficult to measure and often appear inefficient. This creates a structural contradiction. We now require nonlinear thinking inside systems designed to reward linear output. And the research agrees. The Canva study from 2024 found that 96% agreed that creative ideas are essential to an organization's long-term success and performance. While the Superside study found that 78% of creative leaders agree that creative demand is higher than their capacity to deliver. And right now, we are seeing a new force is accelerating this tension. AI is designed to amplify the linear systems that we designed. Creative thinking will remain constrained unless systems stop optimizing purely for measurable output. Goodhart's law tells us that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. In the context of creative thinking, this means that as long as work is designed to optimize efficiency and productivity, it becomes structurally inevitable for creativity to be suppressed. AI did not create this problem, but it is amplifying it. Systems that reward predictability, speed, and measurable output are well suited to machines, but humans are not machines. Tasks that rely on judgment, context, empathy, and creativity remain more difficult to automate effectively. And these are our human skills. And the research again supports this. A 2025 study by Dentsu found that 87% of chief marketing officers believe modern strategies require more creativity, empathy, and humanity. While the Superside study found that 79% of creative professionals say they want to create bolder work, but they are always racing against the clock. So what does all of this mean? How do we actually redesign this at the level of meaning? Right now, creativity is implicitly defined as an output, how quickly ideas are produced and how useful they are to the business. This definition worked when our work was tied to machines, but it does not work for the conditions that are required for true creative thinking. We need time to explore. We need to be able to live with an uncertainty. And we just need time to stop and think and reflect. Right now, we treat creativity as something to be extracted, but creativity cannot be extracted. In the words of Rick Rubin, who is kind of this creative icon who wrote the Bible for creatives, the Creative Act, highly recommend if you're creative. He says in there that when it comes to the creative process, patience is accepting that the majority of the work we do is out of our control. We cannot force greatness to happen. All we can do is invite it in and await it actively. To redesign creativity at work, we need to reframe the work humans do from something that we produce to something that makes the system, something that the system makes possible. This shifts the question from how do we get people to be more creative to how do we design systems that make creative thinking inevitable? So if this is where we currently are, how can we create a new paradigm for tomorrow? We don't remember the Renaissance artists because everyone was creative in their time. We remember them because the system concentrated resources, time, and patronage in a way that allowed creative work to endure. If we want a modern creative renaissance, we must redefine work so that creative thinking becomes structurally inevitable. That means shifting from systems optimized for efficiency, control, and output towards systems that sustain human cognitive capacity to enable creative thinking. This shift reflects a bigger change in how value is created, and this is described as the brain economy. Now, the brain economy is quite complex, but at its simplest, the brain economy recognizes that the most valuable resource in modern work is not labor or time, it's human cognitive capacity, our brains. Rather than treating our ability to think, imagine, decide, and create as individual traits, the brain economy treats these abilities as infrastructure that must be sustained and expanded. So, if creative thinking becomes a system requirement, then the structure of work must change across all 5 of Paradigm Maker's essential elements. So let's move people from execution to authorship. Under the old paradigm, or the paradigm we currently have, people execute predefined work. But under the new paradigm, people shape, challenge, and redefine the work. As machines increasingly take over routine tasks, human value shifts to uniquely human skills like creative and analytical thinking, resilience, and curiosity. This requires moving beyond passive roles to active authorship. Roles are designed to give people agency over shaping work rather than just delivering it. For teams, it means defining problems and approaches rather than simply executing predefined tasks. So a question to consider here: when employee disengagement and burnout already cost the global economy $438 billion in lost productivity in 2024 alone, can we afford to keep treating people as cogs in a machine? Let's move innovation from optimization to exploration. Under the old paradigm, we improve what already exists, but the new paradigm allows us to explore what does not exist. Optimization reduces variation, and without variation, there is nothing new to discover. Meanwhile, creative thinking depends on your ability to discover something new. In a brain economy, exploration and divergence are integrated as system requirements. Time, budget, and space are allocated for exploration. A question to consider here: if the 21st century economy relies on brain capital, how can our innovation budgets prioritize improving the machine over expanding human potential? Let's move technology from acceleration to augmentation. Under the old paradigm, our tools increase our speed. But in the new paradigm, tools increase our spanning. That was wrong. In the new paradigm, tools expand our thinking. Technology reflects the system it operates within. If designed for efficiency, it replaces humans. If designed for capability, it extends human thinking. This shift from automation to augmentation means that our AI tools support decision-making rather than fully automating it. And a question to consider here is if parallel investment in brain skills is what ensures technology augments rather than erodes performance, why are we racing to adopt the latest software while leaving our human skills to stagnate? Let's move our economics from output to cognitive capacity. Under the old paradigm, value is measured by output, but in the new paradigm, value is sustained through thinking capacity. In an AI-driven world, thinking becomes our source of differentiation. Yet AI exhausts our attention, it fragments our focus, and it drives burnout, all of which reduce our long-term capacity to create value. The brain economy reframes attention, energy, and mental capacity as economic assets to be measured and protected. Our performance systems shift to prioritize thinking over volume of output. Now, the question to consider here is if we are projected to spend, insert your projected AI spend here by 2028 on the AI software of the future, can we afford the economic fallout of failing to upgrade the human operating system required to run it? And finally, we have norms. So let's move from busyness to thinking. Under the old paradigm, we're expected to always be on and always be responsive. But in the new paradigm, let's be more deliberative, reflective, and exploratory. Our cultural norms reinforce system behaviors. That means we need to redesign norms to prioritize thinking over visible activity. Thinking is the dominant theme of each of the new paradigms described this month, because the way we communicate, meet, and countless other social norms do not give us the space to do so. The brain economy prioritizes thinking through deep work, reflection, and recovery. Now, the question here is when 1 in 5 employees globally suffer from symptoms of burnout, is our always-on culture a sign of systemic failure to maintain our most valuable national asset? So, how do these principles actually fit together? Well, taken together, these shifts describe a different logic of work. Economics and norms define what is valued. Technology and people determine how work happens, and innovation reflects what becomes possible. When aligned, they move work away from extracting output towards sustaining the conditions that make creative thinking inevitable. This is the difference between managing people as our inputs and outputs and designing systems that expand what humans are capable of. So if we were to start implementing these principles today in 2026, what could 2075 look like? If we take these ideas seriously today, creative thinking becomes something that we actively design for. By 2075, our systems could be intentionally structured to sustain human thinking rather than just extract from it. The brain economy gives us a really useful model. If human cognitive capacity becomes the most valuable resource in modern work, then every system we build either expands or depletes it. The question is no longer how do we get more output from people? Instead, we start asking what conditions allow people to think, create, and decide well over time. This shift can begin today, and anyone can start thinking about these issues differently. When making decisions, I want you to consider some of these questions. Where are people executing work they could be shaping? Where is exploration being compressed in favor of optimization? Does this tool replace thinking or expand it? Are we measuring output or sustaining the capacity to create? And does the system reward speed or quality of thought? If we redesign systems around these questions, work shifts from managing time to protecting attention, performance shifts from visible activity to quality of thinking, technology shifts from replacing humans to expanding them, value shifts from output to sustained cognitive capacity, and creative thinking stops being something we try to force and becomes something the system makes possible. The systems we rely on today were designed for a different world. They are not broken, but rather they're working exactly as they were designed to. The decision for us is whether we continue to optimize for efficiency or redesign systems for the kind of thinking the future requires from us. Until next time, Jess. What did you think? Is that okay? Let me know in the comments.